Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fishtory. I've changed the channel name for now. We're going to try it out. Used to be Secret History Living in Your Aquarium. No one could say that mouthful. And as much as I do love the channel name, it was kind of like when it was my vlog and journal. And now there's like 40,000 of y'all. And when people ask about the channel, they're like, it's something about secrets and history and things and aquariums. So we're going with Fishtory. And if you guys want to get a hold of me tonight in questions, it's the @ symbol and then Fishtory. Let me post that real quick. And at Fishtory, you can do all caps. I think lowercase works too. And so at Fishtory, you can add an exclamation point if you want. That's how I've been stylizing it. But I don't know that the @ feature, the tagging feature, takes special characters. And then if you want to get at our special guest, Lucas here, you'll do at LRB Aquatics if you have a question directed at him. And we'll try to be monitoring the chat, but I'll introduce him in just a moment. But I wanted to say hi to those of you who hopped in here and who are kind enough to join us and want to chat low tech, no tech tanks, and any thoughts and things like that about those. And we're going to just get going here, and we're going to each kind of give a little rundown of how we would tend to set up a tank. Not in great detail. If you guys want to know more, we both have a ton of videos and a ton of tutorials on how to do, different everything from aquascapes and plants to breeding tanks. He and I both have a lot of videos on that. So check out LRB Aquatics if you want to know more, obviously. And this guy here next to me, who is all the way across the country right now. I was just down there a couple weeks ago, and he was kind enough to show me his incredible fish room. There's a tour of that, and he has tours of it and live streams every Friday. So yeah, I mean, without further further rambling, Lucas Bretz, how you doing, man?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me on here. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna have to get used to the Fishtory name. I didn't realize you changed it. I won't lie, I'm a fan of the old name. It was long. I wonder if you could have just abbreviated it and then people could have found you that way.
I'm still like so torn on it because it's been 6 years now. So it's kind of like the people who know, but now there's a lot of new folks coming in that seem pretty interested. And I've seen the tag being used a lot, like, whereas the longer form, I hardly ever see. So that's the only thing, but I agree with you that there's something close to my heart about, like, I started it about like weird stories of the fish hobby and like how different fish were discovered and the science in the hobby. And I felt like the name though didn't reflect the science part enough. But it kind of reflects the, like, hey, I've got a story more than just like the parameters of how to keep fish. Because when it started out, I didn't feel like I had any authority to tell people how to do things the right or wrong way. I just wanted to share the info. And I mean, when I got on YouTube, that's why I liked your channel a lot, because you'd been breeding fish, for quite a while at that point, or at least, you had a good amount of knowledge of shrimp and fish. And so your channel, I saw you as an authority, and so when I watched you, I was learning a lot about shrimp and planted tanks and stuff. Whereas I didn't feel like I could tell people like that right off the bat, because I was kind of getting back into it after, I bred guppies and kept fish for, it's been 28 years now, but I didn't do the planted thing until the last 7 years or so. And it's changed everything about how I keep fish. So.
Yeah. Oh, it will. Once you start learning about ecosystems and be able to create all these little worlds, it opens up a big rabbit hole. And I think it expands the hobby to such a realm that it's hard to even get to the end of it because there's so many ways to do it within that realm.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I think people will start to realize that because in the past, people say, oh, you have a Wallstead tank. And that's kind of the end of the conversation amongst like fish clubs and older folks a lot of times. And, people don't realize that a tank without an electrically charged filter is not technically a filterless tank. It's got all sorts of mechanisms biologically that are keeping it in balance, and a lot of people are scared of that method of unplugging the tank, so to speak, filtration wise. But if you do it properly and you do your research, you know, there's actually quite a few different ways to do that, for one. And you and I have kind of different ways to do that. I still keep filtered tanks, like for my plants, for certain like rotalas and stuff that I want to grow in, like dark reds and things. I'm still going to use CO2 and stuff like that for those projects. But for a lot of fish, they just breed better and seem happier in nature tanks for me. So that's what I've leaned towards, you know?
So that's what kept me going towards that path. A lot of people look at it and say, oh, well, he's just being lazy. Well, yeah. Hundreds of aquariums, you know. It is a lazier way of keeping, but at the same time, my fish are happier. And if I did do water changes, my plants would probably be happier if I pulled algae and stuff like that, because they do like that reoxygenation. But for Alex's audience here, the big reason why we did this live stream and decided to do this live stream was Alex made that video about all us YouTubers have been lying to you. And not really realizing, but what the thing is, I mean, I realize it. It's not about lying, but it's more it's more about labeling. So the no filter, and why people label it no filter is because there's really no good term for what we do, because there is biological filtration, because that's just Mother Nature doing it. As long as you got that stuff that most people vacuum out in your aquarium, if you've got that in your aquarium, it definitely helps with your aquarium.
Yeah, definitely.
The more of that bioload that you, the more fish you can keep. A lot of people think too, if you have a no-tech tank or a biologically filtered tank or a no filter, whatever you want to call it. And see, we threw around the whole ideal of it being labeling it a no-tech tank, but it's kind of hard to label it a no-tech tank because, well, you put lights on. I do have tech tanks where I've got them into the sun. Tested a lot of things with doing it this way. So I try to share that with so many people on my channel, but people, I don't know if they think I'm a magic man or if it's cognitive dissonance. But people push against it, or they just don't understand it, or it scares them too much. What I'm doing is nothing new. Mother Nature has been doing this for a long time, and all I'm simply trying to do for people is to give them more of that perspective and connection to Mother Nature, to say, hey, maybe we're doing a little too much with it. We don't have to make it as hard as people make it seem to be. It really can be that simple. For instance, I made a short today about there's only one way to do it. And I know many people will say, well, I won't listen to anybody that says there's only one way to do it. And what I mean by there's only one way to do it is to do it. Only way to get it done is to get it done. You got to start somewhere, whatever that is that you are doing. The only way to do it is to do it. And the quicker that you could get to A and B without all the in-between, the faster you can progress yourself within this hobby and have a better understanding for nature itself and the connection and joy to your aquarium. And I'm not saying water changes and stuff like that. Like, granted, I think I've done one water change in the year I've been here in this fish room. I just stop off for the most part. But saying that, a little fresh water doesn't hurt. Just don't go hardcore with it. Be careful with it. Daily, like, maintenance is how you get those really nice tanks. And there's so many ways to do it, like you mentioned with those CO2 tanks. Say you've got Rotella macaranda, or you've got those real hard Luigias or Panatel types of plants, and you're going to want that CO2. A lot of those stem plants, especially when you first get them, if they're grown in CO2, you'll struggle growing if you don't have the CO2, because that plant is already used to that CO2.
Or it's an atmospheric plant, like it's been grown at Florida Aquatic Nurseries outside in the sunshine, and it gets CO2 from the atmosphere, which the atmosphere is much easier for a plant to grab gases out of than the water, you know, just because of breezes and airflow. So, like a plant grows quicker out of water, usually. I mean, there's a few exceptions.
Right. Well, have you noticed? I see in your tanks that you have some plants that have popped up
Yep.
out of the surface. So once those plants pop out of the surface, dude, they will go gangbusters.
They go insane. Yeah.
They can draw that atmospheric
Yep.
energy that they're looking for and absorb it all, and then they just grow like crazy. That's ultimately what those plants are doing. That's why those stem plants grow so fast, is because they are reaching to get out of that tank.
Yeah, and
truly aquatic.
Yeah, and as long as you have a decent light, those happen to be Twin Star S series lights, so they have like 6,000 par on them, which is quite a bit. But I mean, even if you have half that, your plant, any light, your plants will come to the surface, but they have a hard time sometimes breaching the surface if they're fully submerged, because it requires a metabolic shift for their tissue to decide, let's come out and above. But once they do that, like they flower, they you can cross species by pollinating. I mean, there's so many other things within the hobby that then it becomes almost gardening in a whole other way.
Sure.
And like I was crossing Ludwigias in the tank to my left behind me, just because so many had come to the surface and were flowering. I was able to use a little paintbrush, you know, just dry, and just take a little yellow flower and a little white flower from two different kinds, mix those, then they turn to seed, and the seed would fall into the tank, and those seeds would grow into a hybrid. And it was actually Crystal Castleman who I was like emailing and asking, like, how do I do this? And she's like, it's as simple as that, you know. So
did you ever get anything out of that?
Oh yeah. I've got like Reuben and glandulosa crossed. I've got lacustris, Ludwigia lacustris, and Reuben crossed. I've got Red Star and Ovalis crossed. Those three all were successful. About 3 weren't, but 3 did actually seed and started growing, which was pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. So the thing I was going to say too is, for people who are completely new to the hobby, I like to actually tell them, if you're scared of setting up a tank that has no filter or whatnot, because a lot of times people will come to me and they'll say, I have a planted tank and there's like 2 sword plants and a Java fern in their tank, and then just gravel, and they're like, this is my planted tank. And I'm like, okay, we got to work on our terminology a little bit. Like, you need a very planted tank usually, or a very alginated tank to support any big fish, I think.
No, they could start with just that. If they just have even if they just had a Java fern and some gravel, heck, even if they just had gravel, as long as there's beneficial bacteria within that substrate,
yeah,
those fish will be okay.
They will, but ammonia could spike if it's a new person who puts 50 fish in there or something, you know?
Well, that's just saying that would be bad in a filtered situation.
Right. And it would, but you would be able to
be bad in either situation in a tank.
Right. But I think
anybody should start off just adding few fish. If you're new in the hobby, you should just be adding few fish.
Yes.
Filter or no filter.
Yeah. Well, okay. So this is what I want to do is, how would you start a tank? Let's say let's go with a 10-gallon tank, and the ultimate goal is to do a dozen CPDs and a couple other odds and ends in there. What would you do to set that tank up?
Dozen CPDs? I could do that in like a 5-gallon no filter.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree.
On the first day, as long as I got some beneficial bacteria.
Yes. No, I agree with that.
First day. So,
but
even if
you're
new. Now, let's say if you're new and you don't have beneficial bacteria, one, you should always get a tank bigger than what you want. But you could go as those CPDs, you could fit a lot of those in a no filter situation.
Yeah.
Because actually where the CPDs come from is more like a rice paddy swamp field.
Yes.
Those fish do not live in very deep water.
No.
And there's no aeration. It's hardly even flowing. It's stagnant. So they're actually used to that kind of situation.
Yeah, Lake Inlay only gets 12 feet deep. I think it's like crazy shallow. Yeah.
Yeah, where most of where they live and stay is more in the flooded shores.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like maybe a foot or two at most, and
But if
dense
I were to
vegetation.
set it up, I set them up for breeding. I'll stick them in a basket. I've got up
Okay.
top of my tanks a basket about yay big where I've got a breeding group of about a dozen.
Okay.
And the basket is probably like 8 by 8 by 8.
Okay.
And I've got them floating in a 75-gallon, and they're just popping out babies like crazy with shrimp and
And,
snails, no filter. And
and is
so
that's a
that's
mesh basket like that the eggs are falling through, right?
yeah. Here, we'll see how this works.
Okay.
Hopefully that the internet doesn't do too bad, but I'll see if I can show it to you. Does it look good on your guys' end? Because
I think when you're moving, it's a little bit shaky, but then when you stay still, it's fine.
so can you see it?
Yes.
So they're in there. They're in that basket, and it's got these holes.
And are the plants in the basket with them, or are they tucked around
Yeah.
the basket?
So
Okay.
the whole point of the plants in the basket is so they have top coverage to make them feel comfortable. So when it comes to keeping fish, especially if you want to breed them, and this is for anybody new in the hobby, anybody who's been in the hobby, whatever level of hobbyist you may be, it's all about making them comfortable more than anything, more than filtration, more than anything. It's about immunity and it's about comfortability.
Yeah.
And the reason why they have those plants up there is it makes them feel more comfortable because most predation actually comes from top. And so if you can guard or cover that, then it gives them that sense of security and you'll see behaviors like you've never seen before out of fish.
Yeah, I've got a tank right now that has CPDs in it. That's just it's a wad that most people say I'm being cruel to my fish because they can't swim, quote unquote. But that's exactly the only way they're going to have babies if they're not in a basket, is where the babies can get away from the parents for a little while to grow.
So you're making life. I don't know. If people saw my CPDs, they could say, "Oh, that's cool keeping them in that basket." But if they would see those CPDs in that basket and watch them for a day, them CPDs are having the time of their life. They don't know anything else besides their social network. They're a very smart fish.
Yeah. So say like someone has though a brand new tank. They don't have the benefit of being able to grab cycle like media from another tank.
Mm-hmm.
How's your go-to advice for like, setting up a 10 gallon or so tank of, a fish, whether it's Danios or CPDs or Pseudomagills or something. I mean, you can take your pick of whatever if you think.
This is when you get into the cycling bit of it.
Yeah.
So if you don't have something to jumpstart your cycles, which you mentioned in a video, which I thought was great because you mentioned multiple cycles. There's not just that one cycle. There's many cycles that actually go into aquariums. Our lives alone is nothing but cycles,
Yeah.
So nature is naturally. And so if you're new to it and you have to go through those cycles, you either wait and take that time or you try to get aquarium water from somewhere.
Yeah.
Preferably not a big box store.
No.
I often recommend people to wash their fish and not get the big box store water in with their fish because there's a lot that can come with them.
Yeah, people keep asking me, is it safe to put pond water in my aquarium? And I'm like, a better question is it safe to put the fish from a box store in your aquarium? I mean, that's what quarantine tanks are for, but not everyone does that, for one. And for two, what little microorganisms are coming with those into your QT tank and may even survive whatever your QT is. And they may not be affecting the fish necessarily, but they may impact your microbiome, some sort of crazy bacteria that we just, comes from a giant box store or farm or something. So yeah.
A lot of diseases as well with getting new fish and for people getting new fish and why they end up dying because, well, one, they usually attract towards the big box store. Find a small mom and pop shop where they've been doing it Like some are better than others, and not
Yeah.
everybody's got choices.
Right. Yeah.
Like especially now, the choices aren't as abundant as they have been, just because of retail industry alone.
You
But
can go online though, at least, which is
yeah,
nice.
you can go online, and if you can get from a reputable source where you don't
Yeah.
have to worry about it so much. I actually sell algae too, where people jumpstart. I used to sell the mulm,
Right.
the beneficial bacteria on the website. The only reason why I don't anymore is because I just don't have something to collect it with. I don't have that filter like I had at the old house.
Right.
For people that don't know me, I had a house full of hundreds of aquariums. I sold it for $500,000 with all the aquariums in it. Matter of fact, I just got some fish from the guy who bought it
Oh, cool.
at the albino galaxy guppy rainbow tiger cross that I had going.
Oh, yeah. I always wanted to see how that turned out.
I I've got a couple going, a couple pairs. We'll see how they breed out and see what they've done. Since he's had them for a year or so now, but with having that and selling that beneficial bacteria, there's so many people that was able to jumpstart their tank with that. I personally would like to get back to that point where I could do that just to help people out, but if not,
Yeah.
local clubs, if that's a possibility, definitely always hit up a local club. Some people still get on forums, Facebook,
Yeah.
meet other fish people, because the thing about this hobby is the community. The community is the best thing about this hobby, is because it's a peaceful, zenful hobby, and
Yeah.
it draws that kind of people, and a lot of people are willing to help.
Well, and we have a lot of really great people, definitely in the community on this channel, for sure. I mean, they're in here right now. And guys, I see all of y'all in there, and we'll say hi and start answering questions in a bit. But I kind of just wanted to give you guys a little flavor of Lucas. And another thing I want you guys to notice is how quiet his fish room is. I'm not in my fish room, so I have one pump in my fish room and two hang off the back filters and 30 tanks total. So,
And that's one of my favorite parts about the no filter, because I can sit in here and it is peaceful, because it's supposed to be a peaceful hobby, right? It's supposed to be very zen, and
yeah,
without the vibration and frequencies
yeah,
that just it's I love it.
yeah. It's definitely unlike anything else, especially if you're a fish keeper or somebody who's been to a lot of different fish keepers' rooms and things. Like the difference between, say, a lot of people seem to know Dean Tweedle from Aquarium Co-op channel, like his setup and his tours of his stuff. He keeps every tank completely like pretty much like gravel vac daily and the water constantly flowing out of it, and there's so many different like filters and noises and things, and that's fine. You can do it that way. He breeds fish fine that way. But then you go to Lucas's house and it's just quiet. It's just, I mean, it's a shock to the system compared to any other fish room I've ever been to. uh and I really enjoy that, like to see that they're getting very similar results. And I would say my personal opinion is that some fish do better with like more oxygenated water, more flowing water, like a very few, like discus or maybe blue rams
I've
or
kept discus and no filters. Blue
yeah.
ring can do a no filter.
I'm not saying you can't. I'm just
Name
saying
me, name me fish and I can tell you if you can or can't.
I mean, and some of
Usually
the
the
like
rule of thumb is, if it's a monster fish,
yeah,
no, depending on how big
the
the tank
size. Yeah.
is.
Well, yeah, if you have a big
It's
enough tank.
because the waste is so big in the bio load, you've got to match that. But with any fish like pretty much 7 inches and under,
Yeah.
unless it's like my mascara barbs where they're made in, they really like that high flowing water.
Yeah.
They don't need the oxygen, but they need the water circulation.
Right. Okay.
So I
Yeah.
don't put any air into them. They just need the circulation.
Okay. And I think like, like rainbow fish, for instance, those are one in general that for me look better. Pseudomagill's rainbow fish. look a little better when they have got a little flow or a water change or oxygen. Any one of those three things can do it for
Well, they
me.
like to play in the current too,
Yeah,
but they
yeah,
don't always like to have the current. So this is
yeah,
another thing to think about. If you do have a filter and you are going the filter direction, I know we're talking about no filters, but if you
yeah.
were to go the filter direction, think about giving your fish a space to take a rest or a break.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. You definitely, and I've done videos where I've mapped out, if you put the filter here, it's going to go this way and the current's going to, come around this way. We put dye in a tank and, you know, that's really important. And that will tell you a lot about, if you put a big rock X or Y in the tank and then you've got plants right behind it, like they're not going to get any flow. So maybe if it's a plant that doesn't need much flow or it tends to get black beard algae when there's flow on it, like Anubias or something, put it behind the rock, so there's lots of things you learn over time.
That right there is another reason why I went no filter.
Yeah.
That flow and algae.
Yeah.
Algae loves that flow. Less flow you have,
Yeah.
the easier it is to actually grow plants. I actually had a 180-gallon bow front without any filtration, but I cranked the heck out of the CO2, and it was just a forest of those colorful stems that
Yeah.
I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't keep up with it. It was crazy. If you go back, I know there's some videos like way back when, but
That's back
it's
when you
hard.
visited like that aquascaper, right? Who had the like crazy high tech, like 3 or 4 tanks
Oh
in his
yeah,
living.
Michael Sizemore. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, Michael. Okay. That's probably what, 5 or 6 years ago now or something.
Yeah, it's probably about 5 years ago.
And I mean, you had also an aquascape set up at that time from, I think, the Aquatic Experience or something that you were working on or something, maybe.
Quick experience. It's
Yeah.
still going. That's actually the tank that had those albino galaxy
Oh,
guppy
is it?
antlers. Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's
that tank's
wild.
still kicking and running. And that filter that was on that tank never got cleaned or changed since 2017 from when I had it. I don't know if he ever broke down and
Yeah.
I don't know why you would. The only thing I'd have to do is say that the flow started getting like real slow, which didn't really matter to me much. It had one of those pumps on it. It was like a Fluval 207, so it had that siphon.
Oh,
So you could
yeah.
just push the gunk out of it. The
Yeah.
gunk would go flying in the tanks. The fish would eat the gunk, and then it would be back to flowing. That was my maintenance for that tank, and it hardly ever got a water change because of where it was at.
Yeah. I did a video on the 207 tank, also Fluval, and in the video I'm like, so I'm cleaning it for the first time, and it's been a year. People lost their mind when I said that, like just because I said it casually, because to me that's not a big deal, really. Like,
It works. It's actually, so think about it. With the canister filters, if they're more full of that beneficial bacteria, that if people know how algae scrubbers work, it would make a lot
right?
more sense to them as well, because it's kind of along the same lines. But what happens is that beneficial bacteria eats all the waste and pollutants or excess of foods and things that may cause algae and whatnot. So as that gets pushed through all that beneficial bacteria, the more there is, the more it's going to clarify. Plus, it lessens the micron availability to get through of particles. So you actually get cleaner and clearer water through a dirty filter than you do a clean
Yeah,
filter.
yeah. Smaller and smaller particles are able to get through till you're just at like dissolved solids is all that's going through. And at a
Yeah.
certain point, it becomes like an osmotic membrane. It's not even like a
Yeah.
sieve or a screen. It's like a slow process that has to work its way through, like just like in nature.
Yeah,
So there's
exactly.
there's all sorts of things you can do. And that's so for me, because people tend to be scared, whether right or wrong. I tell them, set up your tank the old-fashioned way if you want, but I tend to say put in a substrate that is rich in nutrients. Cap it off with
Well,
sand.
careful with that though, because I actually prefer inner, because you
Okay.
can control it easier, especially with foods and stuff. And it depends
Yeah.
on, like, say if you have fast growing stems,
Yeah.
that,
That's
yeah, and like major heavy root feeders,
Yes.
Yeah, that could probably help you, but at the same time, it can be a battle with algae. So you have to, if you're going to do that, go into that knowing that
Yeah.
you will have more nutrients in there. So try not to fertilize. A lot of people
So
put that in there and then they'll try to fertilize on top of it. And
so the other thing that's different is that my TDS here is 20 parts per million, you
yeah,
know? So I have nothing in my water. So if
yeah,
I have a completely inert substrate, like gravel, for instance, then I have to wait for all that mulm to build up for the plants to
that's
start
going to be
doing
hard
well.
to do and no, like in pure acidity because
Right.
bacteria, funguses, and microorganisms have trouble in that type of water.
Exactly. And so that's why I tend to do something like fluval stratum with a third
What
or
is that?
half
Oh man,
ADA.
that's like
That's what
my least favorite substrate of
I'm
all.
just telling you.
I know.
That's what's available at the box store. So I like to recommend stuff people can find.
I was
And
dog in my last video when I was saying it's
well,
only
so
because it's so hard to clean. It takes so much time to
oh
clean.
yeah, yeah, rinsing it sucks. No, I
Yeah,
totally agree. Yeah. Yes, I agree with you
not
completely
as
on
far
that.
as how like it acts in the tank, but I believe it's more like just gravel chips. I don't think there's a whole lot of.
There's minerals in it. There's no no active nitrates or nitrites or anything in it.
You
Yeah.
know what? I'm a fan of the Eco Complete. The only thing I don't like
Yeah.
about it, it is kind of sharp for fish,
Yeah.
but
Well, all
it
of
does
this
hold a lot of utilization.
I recommend under a sand cap for people who are new to it. Just because I also have a video said, okay, you're a month in, you have algae, you know. So that's going to be all due to the rich nutrients in the substrate, you know. But if
Or
you didn't do that, if you used an inert substrate, you could avoid that, like the way you're talking about. But I just tend to do it this way because of my water conditions, basically, you know.
yeah,
And I want a tank that I can run for 4 or 5 years, substrate wise, without having to go add anything other than what the fish are going to add. So I do that, then I cap it off. And honestly, I'm not that concerned on what substrate they use as long as there's potassium, some iron, some manganese. And the ammonia and stuff is not crucial to me unless you're really trying to work with stem plants and CO2. And in that case, if you want to run some super rich, you know, ADA, Amazonia stuff, you're at a level where you're going to know that that comes with algae. That comes with, I mean, there's a whole host of stuff you're going to need to know that's way more complex than just having a tank that looks like a jungle, you know?
right.
Um,
So this is another thing too about the no filter thing, and compared to CO2 filtration, the whole tech thing.
yeah,
So especially for
yeah,
new people, and what the hobby pushes. So everything is pushed like, oh, look, this tank is just so marvelous. This tank for that magazine shoot was just set up for a little while. That's not the long haul. Most of those plants won't even make it in the long haul
right.
because they don't have the space for one. A lot of people don't realize how big some of these plants really good. And I can make tanks like these uh, high tech tanks and filters with no filters the same way, but it's so much simpler doing it with no filter and Mother Nature that way. You will battle so much less. So if you were to start, in my opinion, it would be wiser to start with a no filter tank. Then
I mean,
try to
I
dive into the complexities of feeding these heavy feeding plants that need CO2 and extra light and stuff like
yeah.
that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. If you're
So there's
talking about,
different levels
yeah,
to get
yeah,
to. Having a no filter is, it really is, like I said, a lot of people think I'm doing magic tricks and secrets over here. And
yeah,
it cracks me up because I am not doing anything crazy. Yes, I have been doing it a long time. Yes, I do have expertise, but my expertise doesn't change what's going on in these tanks.
yeah. ABS Aquatic said, I find soils cause less issues if you start with like $300 of plants. Yeah, the more plants, in my opinion, the better when you start a tank, especially if you're going to load it with nutrients at the beginning as kind of like you're front loading your process. I agree. I load it up and then I trim my plants, and if I have to remove plants, that's a good thing in my mind. Like that's fine.
I
But
actually like to start slow with mine.
do you? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what I wanted to kind of hear, like when we were talking about like how we would set up a tank, because like I said, like I do that with mine, and a lot of times with folks, if they're new to the hobby, and if this isn't because I necessarily think one's easier or harder or whatever, it's that most of the resources they're gonna find, unless they're under my wing, you know what I mean, like a friend or something,
Right.
they're gonna go to whoever,
The store.
KG or the
They're gonna hear
store.
what the
Yeah,
store tells them. That's
they're
what
gonna, yeah, they're gonna hear like, no, you can't do that. What are you doing? You know what I mean? And hearing contradicting things like that can make you freak out and do all sorts of crazy things to your tank. So if they're not under my wing, I like to suggest, if you're nervous about it, start with a hang off the back filter. Sure. Let it cycle the old school way. Let it run, but let it get clogged and never replace it once it is. Then you don't have to be scared. You can just let it do its thing. And a lot of people I've noticed feel like that's like their training wheels, you know? And
Yeah.
then I'm
I
like, you don't,
started with the hang back, so
yeah,
good
you
old
do.
Aquatic.
Do you start most of your tanks with one, or are you
No,
going
I
skipping
used
that?
to.
Oh, you
When
used
I
to.
started
Yeah.
the hobby, when I
Yeah.
started the hobby, I
Yeah.
started OBs.
Yeah.
So. Actually,
Yeah.
that's not true. When I was a kid, I used to just throw fish in a tank. So,
Me too.
but that
Yeah.
didn't really count because I was a kid. I didn't even know what I was really doing. That
Right.
was stuff. But when I learned
Yeah.
about plants and everything, I started doing the HOB. Which this is another thing. This is one thing that is good about those filters is you
Yeah.
can put carbon in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Carbon for a planted aquarium does so much. So even if you could just put, say you keep a lot of aquariums, put a carbon filter on your water line, on your house line. It will not only be good for your water changes and your aquariums, but it will also be good for you personally.
Sure. Yeah.
With birds and everything else.
Yeah, I like there's a product out. I don't know if you've played with it at all, but Grant EDER has a connection to the guy who owns it, and you may know him too. He's down there in Florida. But Biochar, AquaChar,
Yeah,
and I've found that if you don't have a hang off the back filter, if you just need to get that charcoal component into the tank, you can just put a little chunk in,
that
and
stuff's kind of, you can make your own charcoal, that bio.
yes,
They
100%.
got
Yeah.
YouTube videos on how to make that biochar. I'm not sure how much he charges for that, but
It's cheap. It's pretty cheap. It's like a big old bag for like, I don't know, $10 or something.
oh, that's not bad. That's
Yeah, and what he does is he actually infuses it with potassium and like a few chemicals that are he basically soaks the wood in right before he incinerates it. But there's no oxygen in the chamber where he heats it, which is how you make activated carbon. You can't be oxygen in the process, and so therefore it's impregnated with a bit more minerality. So
that's good for you.
yeah, which is good for me.
Yeah,
But
I could have gave you a bunch of that crushed up that limestone I got here.
I know I should have brought that home, because
You
that's
could
the
have
other
filled your
thing.
suitcase up with that.
That's the other thing that I've been adding into my, if I had in my actual fish room, what I love to do is to put a few chunks of that activated carbon or charcoal, whatever you want to call it. Do not put charcoal briquettes in your tank,
Oh
guys.
yeah.
By the way, I've had a few questions about that. That is not
Okay.
what we were talking about.
I
We're
don't.
talking about
I'm
natural.
sure, depending on, as long as they didn't have like pre-lighter fluid and stuff.
Right.
Because that
Yeah.
potash is actually really good for.
Yes.
And speaking of which, when you talk about nutrient-rich substrate, you were talking about clay substrate and how your soil up where you're at is. A lot of that kind of soil is, especially if it's from like out where the forest was, and you got a lot of dead material and leaves. Get some of that stuff at the bottom, that clay stuff. That's a great bottom cover.
Yeah.
A lot of people like that laterite, which is the same
Yeah.
thing. And then also you could get some of that topsoil too that's got a lot of your iron in it and everything else. in Indiana, our soil was a lot like that, and that stuff worked really, really, really great.
Yeah, the
But
problem with washing.
I would spread it out and let the sun bake it out.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I break down a big cardboard box or something, and then just get shovelfuls and spread it out and let the sun just cook it for me.
I saw that short you did on the sand and like the dirt, like how you get it on your property too, which was really cool, you know.
Yeah, so
Separate out the layers kind of.
right, and I've been doing videos like that on my channel for a while now from different places with different substrates. And if you just type in LRB free substrates, you'll get all kinds of videos. Like, yeah, they'll be the same topic, but it's not even the same substrates. There's different things going on. So you guys can figure out something for what meets your needs if you're trying to get substrate. Like, I just saved thousands of dollars. I just set up
Oh
like
yeah. Yeah.
plus tanks with sand and stuff. I just saved a ton.
So much money. Substrate is so expensive. It's such a racket.
A lot of people, I don't know how to flip this over. Let me see if I can flip this camera over
Are
because
you trying to get it like profile
um
or the front
I
of
was
the phone?
wanting to show the
If you
front
go to settings,
because on the other side of me, I'm going to be doing a bunch of cichlids, no filter, because that's a big talk that people don't realize. But I got a bunch of that lime rock and substrate in there.
oh yeah. I've
If I
kept quite a few small cichlids without filters, like
there's a
cribs and you know, like apistos and stuff like that. Actually, apistos, I ran into the question that I had was, and it was, I think it was Gary that I actually asked originally, and I was like, wait a minute, if my pH is going to be 5, I don't even have beneficial bacteria that's working
right.
right. So what are you talking about a filter? Like what am I supposed to be doing here, you know? And that's when it kind of occurred to me like I can just put a ton of botanicals and plants, and I wanted to keep it not so black that it like 5 actually their plants tend to start dying. But you know, if you keep it at that borderline, like 6.0 or so, there's still ferns and things that will survive that acidity fine. But yeah, that's when I first realized, wait a minute, the normal biological filtration doesn't even work at that point in the same way. And ammonia turns to ammonium, and then ammonia evaporates off. So you don't even have to worry about that same cycle the same way.
So this is what's weird about that situation is with those leaves and botanicals and stuff. Say you do have that acidic water,
Yeah.
like your beneficial bacteria isn't quite the same, like you mentioned, but there's like a biofilm all around that stuff still. So there is something else that does take care of business.
Yeah.
And still so much to this hobby that we don't understand that lies within all that. Just like fish that we're still finding new fish, we're still learning new things. So we haven't figured out all the
No.
biological cycles and bacterias and
Yeah.
wars and
Yeah. We have.
communions and everything that goes on with these things.
Yeah. You know, there's actually a paper that came out last year, and they found fish in a 3.8 pH puddle, basically in the Amazon.
That's
It,
crazy.
and you know, I think it was like some apistos and some tetras were in this like ditch out in the middle of the woods. But the you know they tested the water, and it was such that they were like, okay, so where are all the, you know, biological compounds breaking down into, or what's going on? And they found that as long as there was sulfur and iron in the leaves, just trace amounts, that there was a yeast that lived there that actually burped or excreted, whatever you want to call it, nitrous oxide, and that
Huh.
fixed nitrogen. So, I
Wow.
mean, we have no idea, like some of the
Yeah, little
details
things
that are,
like
yeah.
yeah.
And it could be different in Southeast Asia than in the middle of the Amazon, you know?
But there is one
So,
thing I do know. Regardless of all that, nature has been doing this for eons.
yeah.
And this is why the way I do it is so easy. It's because nature has been doing it forever. I am not doing anything really that special. I've just kind of wrapped my head around it more, and I'm kind of bringing it back to how people used to keep way, way back in the day.
Yeah, well, when I give my talk about the history of the hobby, you know, I mentioned that, yeah, people used to just have wooden boxes even sometimes or slate bottom boxes with one side that had glass, and then they changed the water frequently. Um, and that's what they did, and people are like, so you mean they never got filtered? And I'm like, well, no, eventually they filter up. It's just they changed the water at first because they didn't want a spike of ammonia, because they're probably putting Oscars in that little box, you know, back then or
Well,
whatever.
see, this is a lot of people fear ammonia, so
Yeah,
plants love to eat ammonia, and
yeah,
if there is ammonia, that's the great thing about algae.
yep,
So ammonia will kill if you keep killing the algae.
yeah.
So
Well, yeah, if you
don't
have
figure
algae
it
growing,
out,
it's a good sign that you've got like a backup cycle going on,
right,
you know.
right. People don't understand. If we could get more of an understanding of that, I think it
Yeah,
would help a lot more people.
I agree. So I think I think people probably kind of get our vibes now. And are you down to open up to some questions?
Always, I love questions. They're my
Okay.
favorite.
So
Yep. I
let's
love.
yeah. Sorry guys, if you've been asking questions thus far, we're not going back. There's no turning back now.
No.
So we're gonna look at it, but do at Fishtory for me or at LRB Aquatics for Lucas, as
No.
we posted earlier. But hello everybody that I haven't said hi to: First Class Fish, ABS, Maureen, hello, Fishberg, Johnny Best, Guppy Beast, your average fish keeper, Luke Wang, Rye Guy Outdoors, what's up? Miss Kitty, Whitney, hello. Arc Knight, Matthew Clayton. Oh, we got so many folks in here, and a lot of names that I don't see on a consistent basis. Maybe it's just a different time. Maybe they're folks that know you, or they just, the combo of us was worth checking out, you know. But
Right.
welcome, you guys. Jeff Kane, hello, buddy. How's it going? Gary Stein, Phillips Fishworks, what's going on? Geotanks. All right, guys. So if you have questions, we've seen them rolling by, and we weren't trying to be rude. It's just we were trying to kind of get through I wanted you guys to understand that he and we have some different ways of doing things. We have different water, but we both have several ways we enjoy keeping tanks without any filtration that is mechanized. But that is not to say it doesn't have a filter. And that's what I was saying in my video when I said all your favorite fish tubers have been misleading you. And then in the video, I think I spoke even harsher, and I said there's been a lie in the hobby, and everyone says there's no filters. But that's what I was talking about, is that we have a carbon filter, we have a nitrogen cycle, we have a carbon cycle, we have all these different processes. And once we start to understand them, for me, the hobby becomes that much more enjoyable, that much more exciting when you understand something and you're able to tweak it and then watch what happens, or see how the fish behavior changes, or, you know, see how the plant growth changes. To me, that's the fun part of the hobby.
And
Oh yeah, go.
there's
Sorry.
nothing wrong with that. Just be careful not to pinpoint parameters, because you start messing with that kind of stuff, it can swing
Yeah.
around.
Well, and when people try to hit like, oh, I'm going for a pH of blah blah blah, or a TDS of this or that, because that's what it said it on the info sheet online or whatever. Like, that may be where it was kept, but there are so many other variables at play that, unless you are very well versed and you understand all those other, what matters and what doesn't, it's kind of like chasing your tail trying to get any one of those things locked in my opinion. Yeah. And that's a whole video on its own. What's funny is I say, guys, if you have questions, just do at, and then I don't see
Not a one.
many questions, and we
I
saw
don't
them
think people care anymore. They're just like,
Yeah.
show me the fish.
Yeah, exactly.
Show me the fish.
Show me the money.
Right.
But
I wish
and also, to be clear, are you do you feel like your tanks are, or do you know they are? I mean, are you using anoxic or anaerobic filtration at all, or are you using all air, aerobic, traditional, just same bacteria that's in a filter?
It's got to be the same bacteria that's in a filter. I mean,
I think so too. Yeah.
it's not really what I'm using. It's just the way nature goes.
Yeah. So what colonizes?
It's what I like to call new dirt.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
essentially that's what it is. As things break down, it becomes new dirt. Go look at it out in the woods. That's why it just keeps getting layered with new dirt.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well,
it's the
lakes. Yeah, and lakes, if you have a tank that's 5 years old, you should probably see banding in it, actually. Like layers of, here's where the iron's oxidized, here's where the mulm is compressed into a little dust, and here's this or
depending
that.
on the substrate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've seen a lot of different kind of substrates throughout the years where, like, if I were to look at, let me see. Oh man, I really wish I could flip this over. I wish I could take you guys around on tours more here. Because like you could see the air bubbles. I showed you last time when you were here where you could see like the different air bubbles. You see the
Yeah.
different colors of things, like you were mentioning sulfur pockets or this, that, and the
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
and stuff. So
Okay, now we have some questions. All right, let's see here. I saw, hey, Lucas, what made you stop using sponge filters? From Crawford Weiss.
So that actually started mostly from keeping ponds outside. I had a sump, huge custom sump I did for this pond out there, whole system, heated outdoor pond system all year round. I've got videos all over my channel, whole playlist about it. But anyways, it was a really cool system. That ended up stopped working, and then I started just noticing my fish, the colors, the behaviors. I started shoving bushes and branches in there. I was just going all into nature. I started thinking about the waterways, the rivers. Eric Bodrock said something to me when I went and visited him that he loves to say to a lot of people is to be the fish.
Yeah, yeah.
And that really struck home with me. And ever since then, I started thinking about being the fish. And that's why it comes down to comfortability and immunity being the top things that we really need to think about for our fish.
I agree. I mean,
why I throw a bunch of meds at my fish when I quarantine them. I let them quarantine naturally. If something happens, then yes, you want to approach it properly.
I'm exactly the same way, because I don't think it's a good idea to throw 3 or 4 meds into a fish tank on a fish that's already been traveling around the world. It's been in water with thousands of other fish, and then it's been put into other water, and then it's ammonia.
And medicated each time.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's been medicated. So it's being medicated, shipped over. It's being medicated to the wholesaler. It's being medicated to the fish store. And then by the time it goes home and gets medicated again.
Yeah. Exactly. And not to mention, then you're introducing, if you're putting any of that water into, or just even on the fish, quite possibly. I mean, talk about a recipe for super bacteria and things to form, or antibiotic resistant. So we've got another question, which is Fishtory. And I think this might be a better question for Lucas, honestly, because he's kept more of them than me. But from Bracken, so how would I do a Tanganyikan no filter setup? I've never been able to keep many plants alive with them. And, I've done Tanganyikan setups that way, but I have not kept fish that need to be, all the Tanganyikans I've kept tend to be okay with being at 7.5. I don't actually keep my tanks at like 8.4 or whatever, and because of that, like, whatever, I can grow plenty of plants in there. Now, I don't know if there are some fish that maybe do need that harder water, kind of like live bears would and things. I'm guessing some Tanganyikan cichlids, do they need that pH to be a little higher?
So pH is a good.
I know you. Yeah, I know you believe. Yeah.
So pH also reads per hydrogen. It can throw people off big time. I always recommend TDS. If you really want to know if you got hard or soft water, you've got to read your TDS.
Yeah.
And as far as the question, how would I do Tanganyikans with no filters, and he has troubles with plants? So if you go onto my channel, I've got a video on shell dwellers
Yeah.
from my old house where I've had them in a 20 high for years, and it was completely planted. I would float either like Taiwan lily or pearlweed, and it had a bunch of Nubius in it. It would get some algae. I would let the algae go. They wouldn't mind. Shoot, it was crazy how many are in there. I've actually got Shelly's in here, no filter. I got Caudal
Yeah.
Conquest, no filter over here. I've got Julia Chromis, no filter. Um,
Are there some of those fish though that need like real hard water?
so those
From
fish
not
do
like
prefer hard water. Same
yeah,
with guppies. So I've
yeah.
got softer water here with 170 TDS,
Okay.
but there's still some mineralization in it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it has acidity, but it also has mineralization, which tells me that that mineralization will break down. The difference that happens with your TDS if it's over 200, because 200 is the neutral. So the difference is your alkaline water 200 and above will
Yeah.
not break down as easy because it doesn't have that acidity
Gotcha.
to buffer and break down that mineralization as well. And this is why some people struggle with like Indiana water, for instance.
Yeah.
It come out like 400 TDS.
Yeah.
A
Tennessee,
lot.
Kentucky too. Yeah.
Yeah. So that stuff's like liquid rock, and it's hard to get minerals to break down for the plants to uptake
Yeah.
the mineralization. Now, as far as the fish and shrimp and stuff, they could care less, unless it's caradinas. They do prefer the softer because they need that for the molt and everything else. But like neocaridina,
Yeah.
shrimp,
They'll
and
adjust. Yeah.
they'll eat off all that mineralization. I've
Yeah.
seen guppies and shrimp living in TDS of 1100 up in mountains of the Virgin Islands, St. John, in a
Yeah.
creek where everything, leaves, sticks, everything was fossilized. Like it was,
Like had like calcium coated all over it and stuff.
oh, it was like everything was like petrified and fossilized. It was crazy.
Wow. That's
But
great. Yeah, that
everything's
is.
so green around. It's not what you would think would be on an island, but I think because all that mineralization from up
It's
under earth.
I think it's because it was a reef that got lifted up by volcanic activity. So all that limestone and coral and stuff, I bet
That
is
makes sense. Yeah,
yeah, like Florida, kind of like if a volcano popped up under Florida.
right.
Uh, Laura Bustos says, but for both of us, if you don't have a basket for CPDs, what we guys recommend breeding? Mossy carpet, larger rocks, so some eggs don't get eaten. A
Ah,
tangle of plants, I think, works fine. I think like naja grass that's thick. If you have a tank that looks like this, you're probably going to have babies that are going to survive if you don't have a ton of other predatory fish. But take your pick. Any fine little plant is what I would suggest, or rocks where it can fall in between the rocks. But what's your response, Lucas?
I'm actually a big fan of rock piles anymore. I am rock piling everything
Yeah, yeah,
when it comes to breeding, just because it gives space for babies to grow up. The
yeah.
microorganisms can also live in there. You just gotta be careful with your cracks and crevices.
Mm-hmm.
Fish are smart enough to back out, so make sure that they can't go in and go eat the eggs or go get lost and get stuck in there. I've only really had issues with rainbow fish when it comes to that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've had thread fins choke on their food so many times where I watched them do it. Like
Choke on food?
mosquito larvae, they eat one
Huh.
that's too big and they literally die. And I have to save them. Uh, and I've thought they must throw it up. Like they must just go limp and then they throw it up because they die all the time in nature if they're that dumb. But
Yeah,
no, I waited
I've
one
never.
night and I was like, oh man. But maybe I've got some inbred dumb, lineup.
Yeah, hard telling because not all fish are the same. That's like you can
Yeah.
have all the same species of one fish, and it could be the most peaceful fish, but
Yeah.
sometimes there's one with a bad attitude. That's been a big topic.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and I've told people I keep bettas in groups with males and females, multiple of each, in a tank together. And a lot of people don't think that's possible, but if you know the temperament of your bettas too, and you got some really docile, laid back, chill bettas, they're fine. you know. But I've also had some that are a terror, but be it female or male, that will go nip fins on every other fish in the tank, no matter what. So I think, yeah, spending time with your fish and just different species and knowing what's quote unquote within the normal range of behavior versus, wow, that's an odd fish, you know. That's part of the fun of the hobby for me too, you know.
Well, that's why it's important to watch your fish.
Yeah. So Leo, a viewer from Australia, I'm letting him cut the line because his message popped up and I don't want to lose it. But super chat, thank you so much. $4.99, Leo. Really appreciate that, mate. How do you get rid of algae on planted substrate without sucking up the substrate? Your tank is a 75 with CO2. So my answer to that is nearite snails and shrimp. If you I don't gravel vac any of my tanks anymore. I will use tweezers to pull a big old chunk of dead leaf or something out of there if I just don't want it in there for some reason, or a dead fish that I don't want in there. But even that, most of that stuff I let go these days. It'll get eaten and absorbed. The bacterial load will compensate. More bacteria will be born if anything spikes, and it'll be fine. But with algae, if you have brown algae, if you're talking about blackbeard algae, that's a little trickier. I would use Siamese algae eaters of the reticulatus species while they're young, or flagfish. Those are the two fish that I would use. But if it's the brown algae you're talking about is the kind that's on rocks and is spotty and kind of like a diatom algae, that's where I would use nearite snails. They do a good job with that. What do you think, Lucas?
You want to know what I would do? So I wouldn't go after. I don't know. Do neorites really eat algae that well?
Oh yeah.
Tried them that much. I mean, I did like way back then, but
Yeah.
what I would do, say if you got issues with algae and your substrate, manually remove what you can, of course, right before you're going to do your water change. And then I don't vacuum my substrate, but say there was some that I just could not clean the algae off or manually remove it. Like, for instance, a big reason why my tanks have a bunch of algae in it, like this tank right here, is just because I'm building my fish room. I don't have time for maintenance, but I could pull this whole thing out in one. Like, I could
and
swirl
that
it up and pull it all out at once. The only thing that would be left would be the mulm.
right. And I
There
could care
may be,
less about that algae, like
yeah,
that kind there.
There may be a few like strands left on the substrate, which you don't have to be perfect with it. If you did really care about that, what you can do is you could just bury it. So just smooth.
Yeah.
Oh, seriously, this way.
Yeah.
Just smooth your substrate over. Same thing with like rocks. Say if you got algae on rocks, you could either take it out, scrub it off with a brush, or you could just flip the rock over.
Yeah.
Flip the rock over, you got a brand new, beautiful. I actually like the patine that the rocks get when they get like that natural patine to them.
I do too, like the hill stream look kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I like to keep different gobies like Stiphodons and like panda loaches and stuff like that, and or pandagaras, and they absolutely love that biofilm and algae.
Stuff.
And
but
even
they eat all the algae. They can't always keep up because a lot of actually where our algae comes from and what our algae is feeding off of is a lot of it is food.
Yes.
We're putting in our tank. I'm actually doing an experiment with Mike from Aqua Pros. He's got that legit food.
Yeah.
And he's been doing some experiments with it and he's been having some good results. And I know my number one algae maker is my food.
Well, get this, the tank that I set up, and if people want to find it, it's my filterless bowl video, how to set up a filterless bowl or vase, fish bowl. It's 5 gallons. It's been in the window for exactly a year right now. It's never had algae, but I've never put food in it because I let shrimp breed and scuds and isopods for a month and a half before I put 3 gold barbs in there that were young. And so they haven't had to eat anything other than they keep up with the filamentous algae, but I haven't had any other algae. And it made me really wonder that same thing, like how much of it is the phosphates and like other crap that's in food.
A lot of
And yeah, there's a lot of preservatives and other things, especially in like flake foods and things. I mean, it just depends on what it is, but there are nutrient profiles that are not what are naturally found at all in the wild. So that's why I enjoy also the microflora and fauna and looking under the microscope and just seeing what's there. And why I wish there was more info available to us of like where they find these fish, like what does it look like, you know, if they take a scoop of leaves and look under the microscope, like what kind of little critters are they seeing? Because there's obviously millions of species around the world of bacteria and algae and all these other things, but I bet on there's a common denominator of like you've got your kind of base layer organisms that process straight from elements. Then you got the ones that eat that. Then you got the photosynthesizers. Then you got your detrivores and your secondary consumers. And so all food pyramids kind of have a pattern that they follow, unless they're in a cave or something. I'd just be really curious to know, like,
but they
what
all
that
have
looks like.
a pattern regardless of where they're
Yes,
at. And
100%.
either has a way.
Yep.
It does.
Well, and it's just like, I mean, unless you were putting bleach in your tank or, I mean,
Right.
or whatever,
Well,
like
how they
you can't
used to.
stop you can't stop the cycle from happening. Like it's in the air. The spores are on our clothing and, we're everywhere. So,
But you would be surprised how many people would bleach their tanks, especially back in the day. They
oh, my mom, man.
sell
Yeah.
that whole idea back in the day.
My
This
mom
is
would,
why I started doing what I was doing, because I see the commercialism of it all, you know?
yeah, yeah. My my mom used to. I had a little hexagonal. The first real community tank I had was like, I don't know, an 8 gallon or something hexagonal tank, fake plants, clown barf gravel, and I had like 3 baby angelfish for probably 6 months, and then like a bunch of neon tetras and some albino cories all crammed into this thing. But she would give it a new filter from the store, a new cartridge from the packs you buy. And then she would use soap and water and literally scrub that. She'd boil the gravel. Like she totally reset the tank 100% every 2 or 3 weeks with her cleaning. And it just cracks me up looking back on it, like just how wrong that was. But
And look
like,
at you.
yeah. But I mean, yeah,
Pollution.
it's wild. Let's see here. I lost track of some of these questions. We got a good chunk of questions here. All right. Just got some black diamond chocolate neocaradinas. Was wondering about their genetic pedigree. I mean, what kind of shrimp? Wait, hold on one sec. Stop it, computer. What kind of shrimp did they cross to get them? Black diamond chocolate neocarid. I mean, that's probably a carbon or black shrimp of some kind, and they're all from the Shoko line. Usually, there are some blacks that come from the blue lines that are like the blue is so dark it looks black. But that's
Yeah.
probably a Shoko line. So it's in the same lineage as like Bloody Mary and Shoko would be my guess. What do you think, Lucas?
So it all started with the reds, and then the
Yeah.
reds throwing like the blue variants, and then
Yeah.
the blues would throw some of the blacks and the browns, and
Yeah.
then now as
So
far as lineage and where all that is, that is so
it's so muddled at this point.
yeah, it's so muddled. It's hard to tell like specifically what yours will breed out and the genetic pedigree, but you'll be able to see it as long as you can breed them out. So you'll start seeing those genetic pedigrees coming out of the mutations in the line itself.
Yeah, they'll throw. So you'll see
Yeah.
some oddballs. If you see blue ones, then it probably came from dark blue shrimp. If you see uh wild looking ones right away, it could be that it came from the Shoko chocolate line. That's a newer development. But the first brown line ever and black lines were from the cherry line that started throwing darker stuff. And then they found the wild shokos, which are chocolate in Japanese. But like that being said, there's 3 different ways to get black shrimp in that story I just mentioned. We just bounced off each other. So they could have started any one of those spots and then selected from there, you know. So who knows what got mixed in necessarily. And that's why names used to matter. But at this point, it's so muddled that I feel like people just make up whatever name they want. It's kind of like pot at this point.
That's why
Yeah.
getting them from proper
Get 'em-
breeds
right.
too, a big difference as far as like what lineage you're really going to get out of a shrimp.
And I feel like with Caridina now you can still find good breeders that know, but with Neocaridinas it's getting really hard to have someone who's like, I actually created this line or you know whatnot. But yeah, I'll leave it
There's
at
a lot
that.
of work that's involved into it. That's why.
Yeah, if
And
you
with
want
the,
to. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
oh, it's fine. And with the Caridinas, a lot of them guys overseas, they specifically are breeding those in tanks, opposed to like the Neocaridinas, where they just throw them into pools and let them go, and then
Yeah.
separate out by colors afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's genetic screening going on. If you want to look at the how far Neocaridina versus Caridina genetic selection has gone, I have a video that's a really long video, but it's the history of Caridina shrimp, and it talks about how it started with the crystals and the tigers, and then how crazy it got, and then how much people lied about how they got their shrimp because they didn't want
Oh,
other people to
I
copy.
lived all this. I lived
Yeah,
this back in the forum days. So
yeah, exactly.
this is what really got me big and well known a lot, was the shrimp, because
Yeah, totally.
I was on the total forefront of that. I remember when
Yeah.
the cherries were first coming out, and
Yeah.
that was like, ooh, a new thing for my aquarium. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
I want that. And yeah, it was only reds and blacks, and the kind of crystals. Like, granted, there was only reds and blacks. There was a lot of people doing crazy stuff with just the patterning.
Oh
So
yeah, like Monica Polar and like those folks, like
yeah,
the dancing man and the like
yeah.
yeah.
The M13 or whatever. I think that's what it was. The one with the smiley face.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I want some of those still.
I still
That's
like
the
that
classic
too.
line. But
But those have kind of fallen out of favor now for like the metallic boas or the steel
right.
boas and that kind of. It's all just a matter of taste though at the end of the
Well, there's a
day.
lot more variety. There
There
was
are.
no variety back then, and then
Right.
it was like a
And they were
couple.
hard to keep.
It took a couple years later, and I think they found like a few different types. That's when like the Aurora Blues.
Mhm.
You don't hear about those very often. I lost some money on trying to get those first ones in, because the lady didn't even end up shipping them. I guess she lost her,
Yeah.
but they must have come in not good. And man, I remember when a lot of those newer ones were coming out, and
Green
it,
Hulks and all that stuff.
it was
Yeah.
so hard to get them. Like the Blue Dreams, my Blue Dream line, when I first got there, the guy who the only guy who pretty much had him in the USA, he was going to be at an event, and like he only had so many to like sell. So I helped him set up. I opened up the door. I was there to
What
get him.
year did you get that line? I was curious about that because I got them from you in like 16 or 17. And that's when I first really got into shrimp. I remember when they came out in like '07, but I was like, I can't afford that. I'm going to kill them. I'm not going to play with that, you know, or whatever. Like the
Well,
cherries.
that the line that I got from that guy that was like imported farm,
Yeah.
they were garbage.
Oh, they
I
were. Oh, okay.
some more from like Crown Aquatics, Jason,
Okay.
and they threw all kinds of crazy stuff. I got those probably like 7 years ago, maybe plus.
Okay. Okay. So when you won that World's Bluest Blue Dream, when those won that year,
I didn't actually win.
I thought you won like best in category or
I
something
think
like
I got
that.
like a second place with my blue.
Okay. Yeah.
So I got a first with the fire reds. The blues, the reason why I call them the world's
Yeah.
straightest line is because they are the straightest line as
Yeah.
far as what they throw.
Yeah.
Because Blue Dreams, especially when you used to get them, and
Yeah.
now you still get them from like fish farms or like big box stores. They're going to throw crazy stuff. But
Yeah.
it took me 30 plus tanks to line out the different mutations. And
Yeah.
honestly, I wish I still had some of the mutations that they
Some of
used
them
to.
are cool. Yeah.
I had these orange, like bright orange and dark blue shrimp. So you know how they usually get that racing
Yeah.
shrimp? Imagine
Yeah.
that.
I've
And
seen that. I've seen pink on blue too, which was weird. Like
yeah, I've seen
I
green and
yeah.
orange, and that's why I love mixing them too with the coals. There's a lot. I
Yeah.
used to sell a lot of Skittles and people Skriddles is what we call. I
Yeah.
started stuff,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I don't do it now. I will eventually, just because I don't have enough shrimp to do it.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that's kind of fell out of favor since I don't really do it as much. And I don't know if Grant still does it. I think he may be like the only other person who does it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there is some really cool stuff you can make by mixing genetics and even lining shrimp. And I've been trying to get people to work on purple shrimp. You can make them. It just takes a lot of time and effort. And it does
Yeah.
follow the color wheel too. To an
Yeah.
extent.
Yeah, that's a wild one. The purple Neo. You
Blue
think
and
it
red,
would
it'll do it.
it will, but it doesn't seem to be consistent though. You know what I
No,
mean? Like
it's really hard to get it to like line out. Like you
yeah.
start with it. What you got to do is you got to start off with a big tank,
Yeah, you need thousands of them
and then
probably.
pick out right, and then pick out the purple ones, and then work them down, work them down, work them.
Yeah, totally. So then we have another question, which is do CPDs need high flow? I think we covered that earlier. No, they do not.
Hill
They
stream loaches don't either. I love that one.
yeah. And well, there's a lot of hill stream loaches, which I mean, which ones are you talking
So
about?
like the
Reticulated ones and
yeah,
stuff.
the
Yeah.
reticulated ones and stuff. A lot of
Yeah.
people think that I've bred them with rock piles and no filters.
Yeah, and I know there's like what 15 Borneo loaches alone. So, you know, as far as the loach community goes, it's growing precipitously as they discover new ones.
Good,
But
because
yeah,
you cannot find any information really on breeding loaches. Many of those.
no, I feel like even normal loaches, there's not good information on
Yeah,
breeding them.
there's none.
Yeah, I breed the dwarf multi-bar loaches. They used to be called Burmese border bar loaches or 9-barred loaches. They're just like a silver with black lines. They've got 9 black lines, and they get about yay big. They don't have much whiskers, but they do have a little set. But I didn't even try to breed them, and they just have 3 or 4 babies every few months, and so now I just have like a pack of them. But I don't know what I was doing. They're just living in a tank that doesn't have a filter and that has a ton of plants.
You
So
made them comfortable.
yeah, they're not in a high flow tank by any means or anything. So
Mm.
I think a lot of people, I want to say this too, that a lot of people ask me for help and they're like, so I did this and then algae happened. So I added this chemical or this product that so and so said I should or online said I should. And then my water looked milky. So then I added this clarifier, and then that clarifier caught, and it's just an endless like
Yeah.
list of. It's like, just please, can you, if your fish aren't dying, can you just not touch the tank for 3 or 4 days or a week or a month or whatever it may be. But so many of these processes, nature has a solution, and it will find an equilibrium.
And I think that's what we need to embrace more is
Yeah,
nature, natural
yeah,
cycle. Like even if I do have algae or say diatoms and stuff like that, like you can wipe it off, you can manually remove it, do your water change. Sometimes I mean, really, you don't even got to do the water change. You just
yeah. I do top offs here.
I just reset a bunch of tanks where I just pulled the stuff out, and then by the next day it was crystal clear. Everything done settled down to the bottom, and
Mm-hmm.
we just
Yeah.
glass so you can see in it.
All right, let's see here. So Ebor Millie says, what is the size slash amount of fish to gallons food web habitat ratio? Okay, so that's a hard thing to I'm not going to give a rule on that, but the question is, what is, so if you're setting up a colony of guppies in a filterless tank, how much of the biomass of scuds and isopods and shrimp and algae and all these other things to each fish should there be? Like, should there be 10 times the weight in algae of each fish? Is that what you're getting at? I'm kind of thinking, because it's very hard, because every fish is going to have different metabolisms, every species, and every algae I mean, you could have algae that's almost nutritionally devoid versus algae that's been enriched by the environment in your tank and is full of, like, it's been like, same with Daphnia, it's been gut loaded with, you know, all these minerals and things, versus you can have some that's essentially like 50% chitin, which is just a shell. So it's hard to give that amount, but I mean, it's a lot. In nature, if you look at a lake, I mean, the more bugs and the more plants and stuff to the fish, when you see the ratio, it's not like 1 to 1 or 2 to 1. It's like 10 to 1, you know, if you really truly don't want to add food. But that's a tall order, and I don't take that challenge lightly of literally not putting any food in
Yeah.
the tanks. Especially with any fish of any size. Like, I wouldn't do guppies probably in a foodless tank. I have, but not intentionally necessarily. I've kind of just left them in a tank and forgot that they were in there, and babies survived when the parents were gone. And I just had a tank in the corner that there's all of a sudden still 30 guppies in like 4 inches of water. And I'm like, holy cow, they survived the last 4 months. Now that's happened. I'm not proud of it, but but they can. And live bears are uniquely suited to eating a lot of algae and mulm and other stuff. They'll sift through stuff. But yeah,
it's actually in a lot of fish's gut biome, and actually makes a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, we spoil our fish by feeding them the fish food, obviously, which is fine to a certain degree.
Well, you got to supplement the fish and the microorganisms with the fish food, because
right, and what they're eating, what each thing is eating.
Sure, they would be eating off bugs that break down, die, and decay in there. Same with the bacteria and microorganisms in there.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, and I know, I mean, people will say, I've got an Oscar, so I only feed it shrimp or something from the grocery store. I only feed it chicken and bloodworms or something, you know, or whatever it may be.
That's
and
like
it's like,
them,
yeah,
you know?
but I'm just going to say that in the wild, what do they eat, though? They eat little fish that have a gut full of grass or a gut full of Daphnia or whatever. You know, they've got varied things. So they may still eat mostly meat, but they are going to also be getting other nutrients than just like what you think of as like lean meat from the store, like cuts of you know, whatever's in kibbles and bits or whatever in the frozen section. They're eating like most fish eat a lot more diverse stuff than you would expect. If you want to blow your own mind, look up, you know, a species and see what's in their stomachs in nature. There's a lot of studies on stuff in our hobby, as well as just, you know, look up like a trout. And it's wild, the stuff that they pull out of their stomachs sometimes when they're doing surveys and stuff.
And a lot of eating is seasonal too.
Totally. Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's see here. Guppy B says, LRB, I remember when I thought LRB was nuts. Now I have 25 filterless tanks and 4 ponds. Thanks for everything you do. Peaceful and easy, bro. Fancy mud puddles all the way.
I love Guppy Beast. He's in my club.
Right on.
He actually hooked me back up with my volcano guppies.
Oh, those are cool. Yeah, I saw those last time I was there. Yeah, those are pretty.
The stash now.
All right, let's see here. What else do we got lined up for us? M Myers, could that be Michael Myers, considering I see a Halloween picture right there? Both of you guys, is there any natural way to keep big cichlids like Oscars in an unplanted tank? Sure, it just has to be like 1,000 gallons, and then you can put a couple in there. No, I don't know. That's kind of my answer, but that's an uninformed answer. I just haven't attempted it. I have no urge to do that. I would just have a filter and not.
I have an urge to do that.
Yeah. Well, you got space, man. I got a 9 by 10 room.
True, that's true. I just don't have the tank for it. As far as Oscars, and how to play with that, especially without plants. If you had enough substrate, what would end up happening is you would grow algae. So as long as you don't mind algae and do like an algae scape with them, you can totally easily do it.
Yeah.
But you would still want to change the water for a fish like that because those fish need water changes to grow. So,
And they dirty their water quick.
but
I mean,
even in nature, there is water changes. There is
oh yeah,
water,
yeah.
like dilution, and sometimes there's not enough rain. Sometimes there's not enough water. Sometimes there's too much water.
In fact, it's very rare to find those lakes. I forget what they're called, but where they don't have an inflow and an outflow of any sort, like Crater
Right.
Lake or something. Those
Right.
are the exception. You know, most lakes have something going on.
Well, a lot of it's just about the water.
Yeah, yeah,
Not so much and what's in it, you know. But anyways, with the natural way too, that calling it a natural way, that can also lead to like even keeping a filter on an Oscar tank can still be a natural way.
right.
Because
Yeah,
as
you're
long as
mimicking what's going
you're
on in the Amazon, you know, or
right,
whatever. Yeah,
or you're mimicking that aquifer or that cleansing through biological bacteria, your biological filtration. So a lot of it comes from the mechanical, which just pushes it around back towards the biological, which is still all natural as well. So there's
yeah.
ways you could use pothos, or I mean, without doing it unplanted. I don't. You'll always have some sort of plant, like I mentioned, algae or something pop up. So
Yeah. I mean, it something will feel like cyanobacteria will pop up if something else doesn't. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
it exists, but that's a bacteria.
yeah, but I'm just saying, like, if you don't put plants or algae there, something will, so whatever in nature
Yeah,
will take its
Mother
place if it
Nature
has
got
a
it.
chance.
Yep,
Yeah,
it'll equalize it for you. And that's why I don't stress it so much with these no filter situations because I know Mother Nature has its ways.
yeah,
And that's what it's all about is that connection. And that's all I'm trying to help people with because that's the whole reason why a lot of the reasons many people get into the aquarium hobby, I would think, is to connect with nature and learn more about nature and have a piece of nature in their home.
totally. And I mean, that's why, like I said, this tank right behind me, it still has a 207 filter on this tank. Um, this one doesn't have anything going on it, but you know, I enjoy like the Pontonal look of tanks, like that lush, colorful, high minerality, mildly acidic. It's a rare occurrence that you actually find that in the wild. Most of the Amazon is kind of plants here and there, plants on the shore, immersed plants, and then the center of the Amazon is a lot of just kind of wood and debris and mulm and algae.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing. If you go swimming and go explore where these fish live that we get for the hobby, a lot of them live just covered in mulm and algae and
Yeah.
detritus. That's like you may
Yeah.
not think it's pretty, but that's where they live. If you're doing this ethically for the fish, then that's where it's at. But if you want to keep plants because you think those are pretty, I understand that justification too. But you're just going for something else, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think you get people that are like, I can't even have a piece of algae anywhere in my scape or whatever. But to me, that's just a recipe to have a nervous breakdown and like go insane if you're, you know, that uptight about a natural process that's just inevitably going to happen unless you fight it every day that you have that tank, you know?
Well, you brought up that guy that I went and visited that had all those really nice, like pristine tanks,
Yeah.
but he worked on those every day. Like
Yeah. Oh
like
yeah.
tanks are still getting algae, but they're being cleaned and they're being prepped and shown like
Yes.
this because
Yeah.
they're not always trimmed just right because they grow out in different phases. It's always evolving. It's always changing. So when people see that picture perfect tank, it
Yeah.
took work to get to that.
Oh yeah. I mean,
And
Luke Wang, who's in our community here, he's a very experienced aquascaper too, but he does a lot of that very fancy, blood vomit and like, all the like crazy plants that you look at them funny and they die, but
the big thing blood vomit is it just usually doesn't have enough space to root, because the blood vomit roots are like this big. Actually, well known for plants more than anything before I got well known for shrimp. Back in the forum days, I was like one of the go-to guys for plants because I was collecting from all around the world from other people.
Yeah.
And then I share within the hobby.
See, I was friends back then with Han Tran.
Han Tran.
Yeah.
Han Tran used to get his stuff from me.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Han got big. That's where he was starting his collection from, and him and I he actually was one of the sponsors for that 2017 tank.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that now. I just remember when certain things that were super rare, like it's before tissue cultures were really being offered, but that really has changed things, like how so many companies do tissue cultures now too.
Yeah.
Because before, like Iguazu 2009, like that plant was like $500, like for the longest time.
I don't know how many times I bought that plant and it would barely do anything.
Yeah, it's so slow.
Slow.
Jose Torres, thank you so much for the $5 super chat, brother. Appreciate it, man. I do. Question on hair algae. I have no filter tanks, but dealing with hair algae. Is hair algae the result of no flow, too much light, nutrition? Seems like something is out of balance. Advice on what to do.
Food, mostly food and too much light.
And with hair algae, if you're talking about not the sticky kind that you can pick up in one big clump, some people call that hair algae. That's not hair algae. That's filamentous algae. And
that's what
yeah. But if you have the green fuzzy algae that's on everything, like growing like a chia pet, that's technically the green hair algae. So if you're talking about that stuff, to me, I think flow and phosphates are a big cause of that, which back to Lucas's point, I think food is where a lot of those phosphates are preservatives in the food. And I've noticed where I feed either fresh cultures of food to my fish or where I feed high quality frozen foods and not so much dried shelf stable food, I don't see it as much. I'm not saying that those foods are bad. I'm just saying that's something I've kind of noticed. But I have very soft water, so it could be different for folks with high minerality as well, too. So, all right, let's find the next one down here. And I know you can't do this all night, Lucas, but it's already late down there. But you want to do a few more? Is that okay? Or how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good.
Okay, so here's a good one I see, and I'm going to jump to the bottom again because I feel like we got kind of, I'm kind of behind again, and a lot of people come and go. So I'm sorry if I missed you guys' question, but we're back at the bottom of chat so that we're live because I just don't want to play that catch-up game. It's hopeless. But Ibor Millie said, green water instructions. I am making a generator for feeding a Daphnia tank. How do I make green water?
So if you already have plants, you can just like, say if you got guppy grass or pearlweed or something like that, just mush it up, put it into the water, and then put a lot of highlight on it.
Yep.
And as that chlorophyll breaks down and everything, the green water should start popping up. So if you don't have plants,
you'll get infusoria too with that.
Yeah, you could use grass or something else.
Mm-hmm.
That green decaying material in it. And then with that highlight, the sun really will get it popping. Put it in a windowsill. You could culture it in 2 liters and all kinds of different things.
Yeah, I've done that too. Where you use the 2-liter bottles. And aeration doesn't hurt either. So a lot of people say, oh, you got to leave it completely stagnant or whatever. But no, I mean, it's a plant. It deals with gas exchange fine. So
you don't need an aerator though.
You don't. No, you don't need it either way.
And the more material that you have broken down within it, the greener and more it should go for you.
So Ebor Millie, it's not just rogue chlorophyll, it's that the algae is single cell algae living in the water that eats that and metabolizes that. As I understand it. Is that correct too,
Yeah.
Lucas?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Sounds
Yeah.
about right. Makes sense.
Yeah. Thomas Hogard says, in case you didn't see my question earlier, in a densely planted stem plant tank, is it better to trim old stems and substrate or pull them out completely? I would say trim them at the crown where they look the best, plant that down low, and then if it's getting too leggy, you can pull it all the way out or cut it if you want. It's up to what you want the tank to look like. But I like to just replant the crowns and then just trim it down to the very bottom, and a lot of times the roots will kind of die. But then you end up with a major tangle of roots at 4 or 5 years in. Like your soil is just kind of it's like woven with roots. What do you think, Lucas?
That is a good way to do it. Another thing to remember, when you do keep trimming your plant, eventually they will start miniaturizing.
Yes.
That's how people sculpt and shape them, because they do start getting smaller and more bunchy.
And they'll fork usually each time on a lot of species.
Right. And it's just like landscaping when you're doing the hedges and stuff. So you trim your bushes, they'd all get lengthy and bushy. But if you keep them trimmed, they'll stay more compact and stay more dense. So more you chop them and then replant them as much as you want to the space that you're looking for. Just keep trimming on it the way that you want. It will grow wherever you trim it from. It's going to double up its growth from where you trim it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree completely. So I see Crawford Weiss in here. Welcome. You say, for a planted tank with rhizome plants, would my dirted substrate be enough fertilizer, or what fertilizer would you add? So now I would say you don't even need dirt. You could have inactive substrate with most rhizome plants. There may come a time eventually when you may need to supplement a little bit of potassium or something, like if you see yellow holes in the leaf or something. But those plants live in very, very high flow water a lot of times, where there's nothing like nutrient wise getting to them hardly. I mean, whatever's in your water may be enough. Just the simple fact that you have fish in your water and food in your water is probably enough nutrients for a lot of those rhizome plants. But if you're doing some crazy aquascape with highlight and like you're trying to sculpt moss or, Java ferns into some topiary, that's when you could get into like EI dosing, and there's lots of different schools of thought. But I wouldn't sweat it. If you just want them to survive and look decent, I wouldn't worry about the fertilizer until you see a lack of something in those leaves. What's your thought on that?
I agree with that, but I would not go off of looking at the leaves to justify whether to put fertilizer in there.
Okay.
Because what happens mostly is, especially with rhizome plants, since there's not a lot of people like tank growing rhizomes because they don't grow that fast underneath.
No, yeah.
Supplied to the hobby. So 99.9% of all rhizome plants in the hobby are farmed in just a tiny little bit of water to where the roots are in the water and the rest is up and out of the air. So what you'll have is the transition of those plants. They don't melt back fully, but some leaves will die back. You'll start getting growth. I would say let it take its natural process. If you have they like more of like calcium and stuff, the mineralization that's naturally within the water. But they still like it just soft enough to where they can break down.
Yeah. I mean, you'll see it growing on like rocks on a waterfall in Africa on like the Congo River,
Right.
With high humidity, sometimes in the water, sometimes out of the water kind of situations, or in the splash path of the. So Crispy said, oh, my question was about Kabamba caroliniana. I pulled some that were floating and planted them in dirted sandcap substrate. Will it root? Yeah. Kabamba, you can float, you can root it. Yeah.
Most plants you can float. Most plants you don't even have to. People don't realize you don't.
Yeah, most plants they'll just put out suckers and anchors.
I gotta get
or a taproot. But yeah, they do pretty fine without it. Yeah.
I'm taking you guys for a trip here.
Alrighty.
I've got 10% battery.
Oh, okay. Well, let's wind this one up then. Thank you so much for your time, buddy. And my wife's she's cooking her dinner. Everyone's commenting in the comments that they can hear. They say sounds like veggies.
Lots of fans.
I know. It smells so good. She's cooking up
Oh.
my favorite meal she makes. Yeah, you can hear, honey. I have a microphone. It's here. I can probably just turn my microphone. Oh no, I've got my living room scene on. I can't show you guys. But it's soy sauce and hoisin sauce and like a sweet kind of caramelized like sauce with onions and red peppers and garlic and chicken, all like kind of stir fried, and then put over rice usually.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I love Asian food. So.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Not a big rice fan, but.
See, I could eat rice all day, every day. I think I was born on the wrong continent. Well, I don't want to have you fall off the earth with us battery wise. So, Lucas, thank you so much, buddy, for coming up, and it's been fun. I think we probably missed a lot of questions. I'm sorry, you guys, but hopefully we got to a good amount of them. Hopefully you guys had a good time. And let us know in the comments. Let us each know on our channels or whatnot. We're not mysterious guys. You can get a hold of either one of us pretty easily. If you had a good time, if you want to do something like this again. And we've been kicking around the idea of including someone like Father Fish, or including someone else in the mix too at some point. So let us know what you think about that, and check out Lucas's channel if you just know my channel. If you came here from Lucas's channel, thank you so much for coming by. And be good to your creatures, be good to yourself, so you can be good to your creatures. And Lucas, I like to let my guest have the last word. So any last thoughts or anything you want to say before we head out?
Well, I just hope this helps clarify things for some people and make them feel more comfortable about connecting with nature, and hopefully just understanding it more, and just make the hobby better for you guys. So I hope this video helps you guys with that. And I really appreciate you having me on here, and that we can. Oh, I always love talking fish with you, bro.
Yeah. We get carried away when we're together chatting. So
that's for sure.
All right, you guys. Well, I'll see you next time. Thank you, and thank you, Lucas.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Till next time.